Today we're going to be talking about the perfect. Please follow along on your worksheet and you can fill it out as you listen. Feel free to pause this video at any time so that you can fill out whatever you need to. So, I've also included the numbers here that can tell you where we are on our sheet. So, number one, when I'm talking about perfekt, obviously perfekt means perfect in German, but specifically today we're going to be looking at perfekt as in the past tense. In English, we do have a past tense that is called perfect as well, called the present perfect tense, but we don't use those terms very often. However, when I'm talking about perfekt in German, I am talking about past tense. Now, you have been seeing this all semester, and I think last year too. I'm pretty sure I used perfekt with you guys last year, at least some. We just haven't talked about it explicitly. So you've been seeing it, you've been understanding it, you've been hearing it. We're just going to look at some examples and see how is this actually set up so that you can be a little bit more aware of that. Here's some examples from what we did last week. Am Anfang des Kriegs haben alle Leute geglaubt, dass der Krieg kurz dauern würde, vielleicht 2 oder 3 Monate. If you remember, we said this sentence means at the beginning of the war, all of the people thought that the war would be or would last a short time, perhaps 2 or 3 months. Here's another example. Aber in den ersten Monaten sind viele Soldaten gestorben. If you remember, we said this means in the first months, many soldiers died. Im August 1914, 40.000 französische Soldaten sind gestorben. 40,000 French soldiers died. Im September 1914, 70% der deutschen Soldaten an der Front sind verwundet oder gestorben. 17% of German soldiers in the front were wounded or died. Okay, before we go any further, look at number 2. Nummer 2, schreib diese Wörter auf deiner gelben Vokabelliste. So please go ahead and pause this video and write those words down on your vocab list. Okay, you should have written those words on your vocab list. Now we're moving on to Nummer 3, okay? Unterstreiche, underline, alle Verben in den Sätzen für Nummer 3. Okay, so underline all of those verbs. Then also complete numbers 4 and 5. Go ahead and pause this video and take the time that you need to do that, and then we'll come back and go through them together. Okay, you should have finished underlining, so let's go through these. Der Erste Weltkrieg hat im Juli 1914 begonnen. The verbs in this sentence are hat and begonnen. Please make sure you underlined both of those words. The sentence means the First World War began in July 1914. B. Deutschland, Österreich, Ungarn und Italien haben gegen Frankreich, England und Russland gekämpft. I underlined haben and gekämpft. So Germany, Austria, Hungary, and Italy fought against France, England, and Russia. Obviously, this was a world war. There were more countries involved than that, but we're keeping it simple so that you don't have a laundry list of countries on your sheet. C. Die Soldaten an der Front haben in Schützengräben gelebt. I underlined haben and gelebt. So the soldiers on the front lived in trenches. Am Anfang haben viele Leute geglaubt, dieser Krieg ist gut und bringt uns Ehre. At the beginning, many people thought this war is good and brings us, do you remember Ehre? We say it in the prayer, right? Ehre sei den Vater und den Sohn. Ehre is honor or glory, like glory be to the Father and to the Son. Okay, so this war is good and brings us honor or glory. So there I underline haben and geglaubt, and also ist und bringt. Now if you think about the sentence, only part of it is in past tense, right? At the beginning the people thought, that's past tense. This war is good and brings us glory, that part is present tense. Okay, in den ersten Monaten sind viele Soldaten gestorben. I underline sind and gestorben. In the first months, many soldiers died. Die Soldaten haben gesehen, dass der Krieg sehr blutig und schwierig war. The soldiers saw that the war was very bloody and hard. Okay, so let's look at numbers 4 and 5. Number 4 is asking, what do you notice about how many verbs there usually are in the past tense? So here's a list of all of our sentences. And on the slide here, you'll see specifically the verb forms underlined that I want us to focus on today. So you should have noticed that usually in the past tense, you have two verbs. In A, we have hat begonnen, haben gekämpft, haben gelebt, haben geglaubt, sind gestorben, haben gesehen. You may have noticed a few more patterns than that. You may have noticed that often, although not always, that first verb is some form of the verb haben. And you may have noticed that that second verb often has a GE at the beginning of it. Again, not always, but often. And number 5 asks, what do you notice about where the verbs are located in the sentence? Okay, so if we say there's two verbs, and we look, let's see, we've got our haben, sind, haben. Let's make these yellow for you. Okay, this is where the verb normally goes, right? It's the second part of the sentence. So in the first one we have der Erste Weltkrieg, that's the first part, and then hat is the second part of the sentence. That's where a verb in German normally goes, right, in the second position. Okay, what about our other verbs, the ones that often have GE in them? We'll make these, you can't really see that, or that. Good color. Sorry, there we go. Okay, if you notice, these are often at the end, or always at the end. Okay, sometimes they're the end of the sentence, as in A, B, C, and E. But in parts D and F, they're not at the end of the sentence, however, they are at the end of that phrase or that clause. So in D, we have, in the beginning, many people thought. And then you go on to have what it is that they think. And then in F, the soldiers saw, and then what it is that they saw. So we see that the verbs here usually go second and at the end, which should seem familiar to you because that's what German verbs do, right? They're always second or at the end. And that brings us to number 6, the rule for forming the perfect, the past tense. Okay, I want you to write this down for number 6. So to form the perfect, we're going to have a helping verb. That's this part right here, the helping verb. So haben or sein, usually it's a form of haben, sometimes it's a form of sein. Okay, a form of haben or sein, so that's going to be conjugated to match whatever the subject of your sentence is. And then that second verb form is called a past participle. That's just the grammar term for what it is. This is what we were seeing as the GE verb. So if we go back and look at these sentences real quick, here, these hat, haben, sind, haben, these are the helping verbs. They go second. Okay, and then these are the past participles. Often, though not always, starting with GE. So to form perfect, we have our helping verb, haben or sein, it goes second, and then the past participle, it's a GE verb, it goes at the end. So we said that haben or sein is going to conjugate to match the subject. The great thing about that past participle is it is a set form. It doesn't change. So if I just know that the past participle for kämpfen, which is to fight, is gekämpft, it will always, 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 always be gekämpft. It will never change. It will never be gekämpfe or gekämpfen or anything like that. It will always be gekämpft. Same with geglaubt. Okay, you guys are probably more familiar with that one, thought. Okay, it will always be geglaubt. It will never be geglauben, for instance. So here's our rule for forming the perfect. I know we don't do a whole lot of grammar in this class, and I do want to say right now that the perfect is not something that I will necessarily expect you to start producing all of the time, like in your timed writes. If you are able to, that's awesome, and you'll start picking it up as we go, but I'm mainly interested in you understanding it when you're seeing it, which is why I'm not going into all the details of how do you know if it's haben or sein, or how do you know what the past participle is, because we can address those as we go, as needed. I mainly want you to be able to understand it. Okay, here's my big but. Aber. Okay, there are two main ways of expressing past tense in German. We do this in English too. It's not a big deal. What we are learning is called the Perfekt. It's the most common way of expressing the past tense in German, and that's why we're learning it first. But there are a few verbs that are easier, aka quicker, to express in the other version of the past tense that we're not learning yet. We'll get to that in German 3. It's the simple past. But you're already familiar with these three, so we're not going to change the way we put these three in the past. We just let them peacefully coexist with the perfect. Okay? So you already know these. Ist, if you want to say something was, you use war. Der Krieg war lang. The war was long. If you want to say had instead of hat, you say hatte. Die Soldaten hatten Hunger. The soldiers had hunger or were hungry. And es gibt, there is or there are, changes to es gab, there was or there were. Es gab viele Schützengräben. There were many trenches. So we're not going to mess around with adding extra verbs in for these. We're just going to keep them short and sweet the way we like them, the way we're familiar with them. Okay, und du bist dran. Okay, it's your turn. So I want you to look at number 8. First of all, underline those verbs and then write the sentences in English. Again, our primary goal here is to make sure that you understand the past tense. You can recognize it, you know it's in past tense, and you can translate it appropriately. Not so much that you are able to produce it yourself. So go ahead and look at number 8. Write those sentences in English. I would like you to do this on your own, not with everybody else in your class. I just want to see how well you're able to understand so that I know if this video didn't make sense to you, if there are things that I can address once we come back from Thanksgiving break. Dankeschön.